quickly, we have two children, Hope and Gus. Hope is a junior in high school and getting ready for his soccer section playoffs. It's a big deal. And Gus is in 5th grade, and he will be 11 on Friday the 13th, and he was born on Friday the 13th too. When I went to the doctor, it was just a regular appointment, and he said, well, Gwen, you're having that baby today. I said, oh no, not on Friday the 13th, I'm not having this baby. He said, no, you are. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And he said, you're having this baby. And so then I did have that baby. To my doctor on Friday the 13th. But we'd like to thank you all for coming here. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our family and who we are. We are very excited to be in Hibbing. We took the route in through town so we could drive past that beautiful high school. I can never see that high school enough times. And I think it's just a beautiful community, and I learned something new about the clock in Germany, Faneuil Hall and Hibbing, right? And so I have to make sure I get to see that. I know, you didn't know that either. It's a new thing. I'm gonna Google it on our way to our next town, because I think I have to come back and see that. But we just wanted to thank you, and we most especially wanted to thank Ron for hosting us and bringing you all here together, and for your service, right, and for your ongoing service. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, and again, thank you all for coming. We so appreciate it.
Hey, Ron.
Gwen, thank you, and I want to welcome you to Hibbing. We have Mayor Canada here. He can give you a formal welcome.
Well done, Congressman.
It's always good to be back.
So I want to thank you all for coming. However you got here, whoever told you to be here, thank you very much. It's tough on a nice fall day to come in for any kind of function, let alone a political function.
That's right. That's
I've been
right.
in the game for 40 years. I know what that for.
We're hoping for rain.
Anyway, I don't have to tell you all what happened to rural Minnesota in the last election. I live in a county that didn't go Republican since Herbert Hoover was president. Out of 87 counties, we won 8. And people are all asking why? Well, having served in the Senate for 12 years and in politics and in public service, I can tell you why. It's because people forgot about rural Minnesota. Our party forgot about rural Minnesota. Good talk, nice lip service, but nobody really helped. So anyway, so when the candidates start coming out for running for governor and who they were, I haven't talked to them. I said, I only have 2 questions for you. 2 questions. I said, I assume you're going to be good on all the social issues if you're a BFLer, and you're going to be good on issues for elderly and transportation and health care. But for rural Minnesota, the things that have happened are killing us, and they're going to put us out of business. So the first question is, what's your position on mining? And being supportive of taconite mining isn't good enough. That's the wrong answer. You have to be supportive of safe mining expansion to other areas except taconite. And question number 2 is, are you going to abide by the endorsement? None of them answered those 2 questions right. In fact, none of them answered either one right, except Congressman Walz. I didn't know him from Adam. I knew who he was because he was in Congress. I got to meet him. I got my chance to answer his 2 questions, ask him those 2 questions, and he answered right. So we had a good conversation, and I decided to support Congressman Walz. And so I think it's important that you're here today, and it's important that he's here today to meet Minnesota, rural Minnesota. Real Minnesota.
That's what it is. Thank you.
I told them we're farmer labor rights. That's where we start from. And so you have to read the Farmer Labor Right Party platform from 1934 to understand the rural Minnesota. I always remember my grandfather was always mad because Hubert Humphrey and John Blotnick sold out the farmer labor rights. Hated the Democrat, hated Humphrey, hated Blotnick because he sold us all out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Walz. He's going to talk, and if there's time left, I think he's going to, I'm going to turn it over to him.
Sure.
Hey,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's
No, no.
however.
All right.
It's your house.
That's right. That's right. Sure. Thank you
It is your
so
house.
much. Absolutely. Hi, I'm Peggy Flanagan. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to be running with this guy as his lieutenant governor pick. So I've known Tim Walz for quite a while. We met when he was a camper at Camp Wellstone in 2005, and I was a trainer. So I trained Tim Walz. I taught him everything he knew. Right? You know, that's not true at all. But I started off at Wellstone Action and worked there for about a decade. And we talk a lot about, still to this day, that camp where Congressman Walz was. Because folks said, who is that guy? Who is that guy? And he knew so clearly who he was, what he cared about, and the fact that he felt really passionate about making sure that folks had a fair shot. And so I couldn't be more proud to be on this ticket with my friend, who I've known for a long time. You know, and Congressman Walz and I don't always agree. We don't always agree, but here's what we do. We make sure that we always have respectful conversations, and we have a lot of admiration for each other. And I think that that's one of the things, and my former colleague, Carly Moline, is here. And so I serve in the House now and see all the time how often people try to divide us by rural, greater Minnesota and the urban core or the suburbs. And one of the reasons why running with Tim was so appealing is because we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that, and nobody benefits when we divide one another. And so we're really here to make sure that we're running on a ticket for one Minnesota, and really looking at the fact that families need to be able to provide for themselves, and that those sort of bread and butter issues of making sure that we have what we need. I'm a mom to a 4.5-year-old little girl, Siobhan, and every decision that I make is done through that lens about thinking about her and her future, and what kind of state she's going to be able to live in, and that sort of idea of wanting every opportunity for her, and that's why I'm here. So I came here through an interesting path. I serve in the legislature now, but that certainly was not my plan. I worked for a guy named Paul Wellstone. That was my first campaign in college, and learned how to do politics exactly the way that we're doing them here. Having cups of coffee with folks, listening to them, and really getting to know each other. And I think so often when people are frustrated by politics, that is what's missing. We don't show up and we don't listen to each other anymore. So I'm here to have a lot of cups of coffee with y'all. And Tim will have a lot of cans of Diet Mountain Dew. Do you know this about him? He's a big fan of Diet Mountain Dew. Yeah, that's his vice. The only vice, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. So, for sure. Yes, yep. But that's sort of how I learned how to do this. And I was able to work at Wellstone Action for a decade, training folks across the country and how to make change in their own backyard and their own community. And after that was at Children's Defense Fund for 3 years, and worked really closely with folks across the state on both sides of the aisle to move things forward for children and families. So now I'm here, and I'm really excited to be able to bring a little bit of that perspective to some of this work. I grew up with a single mom in the suburbs. She had a Section 8 housing voucher, and that is how we moved to the community called St. Louis Park, which is a community that I now am able to represent in the legislature. We were able to take advantage of programs like the Child Care Assistance Program. My family also needed to use food stamps. But because of those programs, because of that investment in my family, my mom was able to go back to school and get a better paying job and lift our family out of poverty. And so I think, when I think about my own experience, we hear, and Carly remembers, we have a lot of conversations about those people. I am those people. And, the best of Minnesota is when we come together, we invest in our families, but also the community rallies around folks too. And so when I think about what is possible in this state, I think that my story is a big part of that. So one of the reasons I'm running with this guy is because Tim sees the full potential in those around him. Whether he's a teacher in a classroom, he sees the full potential in his students. If it's the players on his field, he sees their full potential. Or if it's the soldiers that he served with, he sees their full potential. and coaches folks to greatness. And so that is why I'm here, because Tim sees the full potential in all of us in one Minnesota. And I can't think of a better person to help coach us to the state and to the community that we want to be. So thank you so much for being here today, for having us here with you. And this is the fun part. This is all, and I get to do this part every time. It's so great. So I want to introduce to you the next governor of the state of Minnesota, Congressman Tim Walz.
Thank you. Thank you all, you are kind. First of all, Ron, thank you. You are gracious, you're an ambassador for this community. When I thought about running for governor, and I certainly never planned my life around this, one of the things I always know is in any job, especially politics, the trick is surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you. In my case, it's a big pool to choose from, but one of the things that your name came up over and over and over again. They said, you need to set up a meeting, you need to get up there and talk. We had that meeting, and then you said, well, you need to go over and talk to Carly. And it starts to go that way, of about how communities work and talking to folks. So I'm grateful you would do this. To Peggy, she's just fantastic. Peggy is incredibly humble in how she talks about things, but I think in watching people, and it's one of the things I've always seen, I do appreciate the way Peggy says that. I think that is one of the things, once you're a teacher, it is about seeing that potential in each child. It's about trying to get it out of them, and I think Peggy seeing that, I'm humbled and honored by that, but I think I also see talent where it exists, and I knew when I saw Peggy at that Camp Wellstone, because in 2004 was on a deployment with my National Guard unit, and in support of Enduring Freedom, came back before the 2004 election and was frustrated the way things were going, frustrated where how things were being done, frustrated that we were in these wars of choice. Looking back now, it almost seems quaint how frustrated we were right then in 2004 compared to how we are now. But I wanted to figure out how to get engaged. I wanted to know if there was something I could do in my community more. I was teaching, I was in the Guard unit, I was in the Kiwanis, I was doing those types of things, but it felt like something had gone off the rails, and it doesn't surprise me when I watch this last election, because I listened to those words that the president said. Before I went to Camp Wellstone, I didn't know how to give a political speech. I didn't know how to talk to people. It was like this weird halftime football coach speech thing I was giving. I remember one time I was getting all riled up and said, don't forget, we're the people who threw that tea in the harbor. I didn't know it. I was like the Tea Party at the time. But I was expressing that same frustration of people working harder and not getting further ahead, watching their jobs leave, watching their communities start to lose workers and lose potential, and all the while feeling that there was nobody really listening or knowing how they lived or actually understanding what that was like. So I watched Peggy, and when I went there, I went home and told my wife, I said, there's this young, passionate, smart woman who is talking about this the way I wanted to hear somebody talk about politics, because what I was worried about is I was assuming everybody knew all of these things. I had never run for anything in my life, and I figured everybody knew all this. Now I know they don't know squat, once I'm there, but I had no idea on that. And I remember Peggy who said, well, look in people's eyes and listen to their heart, and don't try and figure out where the center of their politics are. Try and find out where the center of their lives are. They'll tell you, and you can listen to them, and you can start to reflect on that. So we did it, and I am a school teacher. I grew up in a small farming community in northeast Nebraska, had 24 kids in my class, 12 were cousins, for real. You know that. Some smart aleck at these always says, how was that prom dating? And, interesting. My mom still lives on the farm, has been in our family over 130 years. She's still there and still kicking. But what I understood was, and I watched with her, my father got cancer when we were relatively young. My little brother was 8, and I was in high school. And I watched the medical bills mount up. I watched her put off retirement. She went back and trained herself to become a licensed practical nurse, and the only real job in our small community was either at the high school or at the nursing home. And she became an aide at the nursing home where she worked. but I also watched smart policies that were put in place by people who came along and understood that, you know what, we wanted to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We didn't have any bootstraps, so there were Social Security survivor benefits, and we were able to do that. And I got a wonderful public school education. I had the opportunity to join the military when I was 17, joined the Army, and in the Army National Guard I spent my career. I have what I consider to be responsibility of being the highest ranking enlisted member of the military to ever serve in the United States Congress. I was out nursing a soldier at Walter Reed shortly after I was elected, and they introduced me to this young Marine. And they said, this is Congressman Tim Walz. He's a retired Command Sergeant Major in the Army Artillery. And this young troop who was wounded in Afghanistan, just in good spirits, said, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. And I'm like thinking, oh, here we go. It's the Marine Army thing or whatever. I said, what are you sorry about? He said, I'm sorry you took the demotion to Congress. And I said, he was probably right. I serve as our Democratic ranking member in the House Veterans Affairs Committee. And I have to tell you, a couple months back, the Wall Street Journal wrote a story and said, if you want to know how Congress is supposed to work, look no further than the House VA Committee. We are moving legislation from GI Bill to reforms in the VA to make care easier and better and smoother. And it's being done in a very bipartisan manner. I make no bones about it. I got asked some of you said you watched the WCCO show this morning, and the question they asked is Tim Walz too conservative to get to be elected by the DFL? And I said, well, the Republicans always say I'm not too conservative, apparently, when they're coming. But I said, I think I strike a little different chord with that background and that teaching and where I've been. I never planned to run for Congress, but what I understood is that there were voices that weren't being heard. There were voices that wanted to understand why is it that every time someone gets elected, they come back and bash public school teachers. How come they come back and bash this idea of collectively bargaining? There's nothing more democratic than the ability to organize your workplace to make sure that there's safer working conditions, better quality workers, the ability, imagine this, the radical idea that you should be paid a living wage for the work you do, or that at some point in time you should be able to retire with a pension that has some dignity to it so you can live out the time doing the things you want to do. Those are not radical leftist ideas. Those are basic principles that built our society. And I think all of you know that this push towards taking away collective bargaining rights, this right to work or whatever, is one of the things on the first agenda. And so when I got excited about thinking about where are the real issues going to be fought, they're not going to be fought in DC. You've watched what happens there. I'm proud to have voted to move healthcare forward. I'm proud to have added millions of people to healthcare. I'm proud to have supported the ACA. I also know it has things that need to go further. There's things that need to be improved, the individual market. We need to always continue on that journey. Well, you watched us vote time after time after time after time, and you heard people promise that they were going to repeal it. You knew they weren't going to repeal it. You knew they weren't going to do that. That was all talk. There was nothing there. People's lives are hanging in the balance by this, and it is not a radical idea that you should be able to get basic medical care if you live in the greatest, richest country on earth. It is not a radical idea. And I've always said this, even if you don't morally care that someone gets care, it just makes good sense to keep people healthy so they can go work and make the economy chug along and pay their taxes. I always said this as a teacher. I cared deeply for the humanity of each individual student. I wanted them to become the best they could be. I also believe that Thomas Jefferson was right. Without a public education educating wider, the whole public, it would be very hard to have a democracy if you could not educate that whole population. But the third rung in that stool was a little bit selfish on my part. I wanted my students to get a great education so they could go get a good job, pay their taxes so I could retire on Social Security. Or they didn't need to come to my garage to steal my lawnmower because they didn't have a job. Those were things that just seemed to work, that we were all in together. It just made good sense. A healthy, educated population is good for the economy. It's good for our communities. And again, if you want to hear about radical educational change, just fund it. Just fund it and show some support to those teachers. Just make sure that we never took an oath of poverty to do the to do the job. I didn't expect to get rich doing it, but what I would like to do is not have my elected officials act like they know what it's like to be in there and understand what all those children bring to that classroom. And I'd like to have a little respect for it, knowing that all of us, I was back at Mankato West, had their homecoming last week. And we do a big homecoming there, and it's a great big deal. And yes, I'm a little partial to Mankato West, where we won a state football championship. So when I got there from Nebraska, they said, we're struggling a little bit here. And I said, what do you mean struggling? Well, we're 0-27 over the last 3 years. I'm like, that's awful. The first year I was there, I was gung-ho and I was gonna change things around. The last game of the season, my leading scorer with my defensive tackle, we got 2 points. We got shut out in every single game that year. 2 years later, we did win a state championship. We were back at homecoming, where they've now won 4 of them there. But I watched the class from 25 years ago, 1992 was there, and the class of 1967 was there. And lots of them had come back. And their class speakers were speaking, and they gave these eloquent speeches. But what struck me so deeply was, here were 43-year-olds in the middle of their lives with young families, and here were some older folks, 68, coming and they were talking about this. But the love that they felt and the clarity that they talked about those public school classroom teachers have given the opportunity to achieve their dreams, however they diverged from that place, whatever they did with their life was built on that foundation. And if we're not going to do it in Washington, then we're going to have a teacher in the governor's office, and we're going to focus on those things where we invest in people. We make things work. And I have not spent my time in Congress denigrating the other side. I say this often, Brian, you probably, I do not disagree with my Republican colleagues because they're Republicans. I disagree because they're wrong. And that's a big difference in how you do things. And I talk about trying to find those common ground solutions, trying to find ways that it's not. I represent one of the last 9 Democrats that are in rural America. Of the 403 congressional seats, the rural ones, there's 9 Democrats left that are across there. And I have an understanding that, again, Ron was talking about it, what's happened with the Democratic Party? Who was there for education? Who was there for Social Security survivor benefits? Who was there for investing in infrastructure? Who was there saying that we should have access to health care and all that? Why did people lose faith in us? Why did they not believe that we were with them? And I said, a lot of it is trying to understand the culture of this. When I listen to people talk about this and say, maybe people should just get other jobs. We'll transition to a new economy, they can get another job. A job is not just how you make your money, it defines who you are. Me being a teacher is how I see myself, it's how I see the world. If you're a nurse, that's how you do it. If you're a small business owner, or if you're a miner, that's how you see the world. And for someone to tell you that those things are just jobs of how you pay it, that's where we start to have the breakdown. I think middle America saw a lot of people say, the economy's changing, populations are shifting, whatever, you just kind of got to roll with the changes. And a whole lot of people didn't feel like it. We are not failed urban areas in rural areas. We are not failed Chicagos. We did not aspire to be urban areas. We aspired to have a different style of life. And we had an economy in Minnesota that understood that. Equity of education. There is no dang reason that the students in Cleveland, Minnesota should have to be in schools with a leaking roof. And they've gone through 17 bond referendums to try to get it fixed. And when they drive up around to other schools, they see 3 dome stadiums with turf on the field. That's how you start to create problems. That's start you have the haves and have-nots. That's how you start to have people feed on this idea of dividing us. And in this ticket, I chose Peggy Flanagan not because we agree on every issue, but because I trust her heart. She has a different set of experiences. She came from a different place than I did, but she also took advantage of the very same things that my family was able to take advantage of. Good public schools, an investment in our communities, opportunities that were there for everyone, and not things that said, no, there's a barrier here and you can't go on. We, in this state, have always invested in our people. And we have watched it happen across the upper Midwest. Ohio fell, Michigan fell, Wisconsin fell, and Iowa fell. By people telling them, somebody's taking from you. Somebody you have to have a grievance against. This is why things aren't working. And they've never delivered a damn thing. This legislature, and you guys have worked in it, remember how they were told us that broadband was going to come to every part of rural Minnesota? Well, the students in Wimmer will tell you they wouldn't be in the damn Perkins doing their homework if they could get broadband at their house, but they cannot because there's none of it there. That's holding us back, and it's not the way we do business. And again, if you don't necessarily care individually about those students in Wilmer, I guarantee you it's in our best interest. As Wilmer goes, so goes Hibbing. As Mankato goes, so goes International Falls. If we start to have this idea that it is not a whole bunch of little Minnesotans, it's a whole bunch of unique people bond together around a common bond, a common idea that we can all achieve, a one Minnesota. And I told this story in the last place. Being in the National Guard, have walked the streets of Grand Forks after the flood. I've been in Rushford, standing on the tops of homes as the water was up at the 2nd level. Been in St. Peter in tornadoes, and down in Albert Lee. And understand what communities can do together, understanding what we can do when we bond together. But it was a great example outside a farm, a guy, Mike and Mary's house, And I walked up there and it was a bright sunny morning. Wouldn't have imagined the night before we had that devastating tornado that went through Albert Lee. And I walked up to their farmstead and it's absolute chaos. There's everything anywhere. And Mike and Mary are sitting down in the basement, just the foundations, because their house is a mile away. Had been removed. The neighbors are out gathering up all the cattle and picking up papers that had blown over. Kids are in a line walking through the cornfields picking up the papers. The rural electric cooperative guys are trying to pick up the wires and restring power back to the barn so that they can get milking again. And I walk up and I look at Mike, he's down there, and I said, man, Mike, I'm sorry. He goes, hey, no one got hurt, him, and he said, and Mary's been asking about a new house, so I guess that's what happened. And I'm saying, how, these are tough people over there, tough Minnesotans. But then it was great, because right at the same time, the rural mail carrier came driving up, got out of the car, came out with the post and the mailbox, walked up there, put the mail in and handed it to me. And I got to thinking to myself, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. And this idea that they've divided us, that we can't do things together, that there's not a role. And as a party, that we somehow can't be a party that is excited about success, and excited about economic growth, and is excited about realizing that the kids at Brooklyn Park need every opportunity the kids down in Blooming Prairie need. And that if we invest equally, if we think about this together, if we see our neighbors on that, we can do it. And a politics that doesn't try to divide us, a politics that finds joyfulness, a politics that try and find solutions. And again, if I'm getting questioned on a show that are you too eager, and some of my opponents have been saying, we don't need a compromise candidate. We don't need this or whatever. You know what we need? We need somebody who's willing to stand up and stand in the middle of tough issues. Stand together and say, is there a difference of opinion here? Is there a different viewpoint? How do we bring this together? What's in the best interest of our constituents? So I'm running for governor of Minnesota because I've been there and watched my mother as my father died and benefited off Social Security survivor benefits. I'm running because I know my public school teachers gave me an incredible opportunity to let me seize upon my dreams. And I also know as a teacher, I was there to put money out of my own pocket to make sure those kids were able to get that. That's what our teachers are doing every day. And I'm running for governor of Minnesota because I'm hopeful about what we can do together. This can be a positive. This can be a positive campaign. I will run as a school teacher. I will run as a pro-labor candidate. I will run as a soldier who knew it was there. But probably more importantly, I'm going to run as a dad of two young kids who I want to see them enjoy the way this state has been run. This state has built on our traditions to give them that opportunity. So I hope you'll join us. I didn't win, and I tell you this, when I ran, no one told me this when I first ran, because I was madder than hell, so I told my mom, we decided we were going to run, and Gwen says, you're a little obsessive compulsive, why don't you just write a letter to the editor and see if you call But when I ran, we found there's only been 2 Democrats in 125 years win in southern Minnesota. The other one left the party. But I ran as a strong progressive. I ran as someone who could see that there was ways we could bring people together. I ran on not telling people I had all the answers, because I'm telling you, Democrats have a real problem of just laying out these wonderful 10-point plans and then telling people how smart we are and then wondering why they don't vote for us. When we first didn't ask them, does this 10-point plan help you? Do you have a plan that works better? Do you understand this area better than we do? And if the answer is always going to be yes, how do we start bringing those people in? How do we start bringing them together? And so I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll get a chance to know Peggy the way I've known Peggy and the rest of the state sees us, understanding that this is about partners. This was chosen, and I trust her. I trust her values. And I also chose her because I want her to challenge me on my assumptions. And I want her to be challenged by the assumptions that she has, because I think we possess the potential. It's going to be very hard to unite Minnesota if we can't figure out how to unite Democrats. If we can do that, and we can run a campaign that shows that we all have these common values, we all have this sense of community, there's a whole lot of people out there. It happened with Rick Nolan up here, and it happened with Colin Peterson, and it happened with me and just a couple of others, that people were willing to cross-ticket vote. They were willing to try and bind. And it's those very people, too, that the policies that we're advocating for, I don't want to win for Greater Minnesota because I'm a Democrat and from Greater Minnesota. I want to win because I believe our policies as Democrats will do more for Greater Minnesota. We'll do more to provide those kids in Cleveland with an opportunity. We'll do more to make sure the strength of this state is equally geographically balanced. So thank you for that. We're going to work hard for you. The one thing I will tell you this is I know how to build winning teams. I truly do. Anyone who's telling you anything separate, and Ron and I talked about this, Democrats spend a lot of time now, and you've probably seen some of this, arguing with each other. Our fight's not with each other. Our fight comes next November. If anything we're doing now is distracting from winning next November, then shame on us. Anything we're doing now that doesn't make this state start to see who we are and who we stand for, shame on us, because we saw it last time. I think there was very little doubt that the people who voted in this state and the way they voted, especially in greater Minnesota, they simply voted because they didn't know who we were as much. They didn't know what we stood for. And I'm going to tell you as one of them, Peggy's going to tell you as one of them, and she says this, we look like Minnesota. We look like all of Minnesota. We bring experiences that stretch that spectrum, and we'll work hard for you. So give us a chance, talk to us, engage in this campaign, challenge us to come up with the issues. We are not afraid to stand in the middle of some of the hardest issues. We are not afraid when people give you advice. Oh my God, whatever you do, don't talk about water. Oh my God, whatever you do, don't talk about this. So you saw this week, I'll talk about guns. Peggy will talk about guns. We as a nation need to talk about guns. We do not need to wake up in the morning and see dozens of our fellow citizens killed. And we can do this in a manner that is our heritage, like many of you in this room. I'm excited about next weekend when the pheasant season starts, and I'll be out there with my relatives and my friends. The dogs will be out in the field, and we'll flush some pheasants. And those are memories that last a lifetime. And there is responsible gun ownership, and there's things that we can do to make that happen. As a governor, you're going to need somebody who has the trust of people who both hunt and people who are deeply concerned in the cities about gun violence. Peggy and I bring that to you. So give us a chance, get excited about this. If we can get a few Republicans on board, that is fabulous too. I don't want to out you or anything, but I'm excited. All right. I certainly, my job is to represent everyone, and you do not represent a rural district that's gone Republican for the last 125 years without showing respect to your neighbors and understanding that we can do this in a respectful manner. We can disagree. You can trust that I will never normalize hate speech. I will never normalize some of the things that I've seen coming out of Washington, but I will not disdain nor disparage my Republican neighbors, because I know they love this country as much as we do. I know they care deeply about it the same way. What we need is leadership in this state to get beyond that and start moving us forward. So with that, Ron, I'd be glad to answer all your questions before we go. And so, thank you all. Really nice job of coming. Thank you all. We got sheets to sign up. We've got things we're going to be doing. We will outwork everyone. We're not afraid to do that. We'll take our message everywhere, and I think it's time to have a greater Minnesota school teacher and a mom and a leader from the Twin Cities working hand in hand to better Minnesota. So, thanks.
Thank you.
You ready?
Any questions for the congressman? Also, there's food back there, make sure.
Oh
you
yes,
share.
food.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's your favorite hunt dish?
Okay. Thank you for asking. If some of you don't know this, I should have planned them. This is good. Franken does a hot dish competition, and I've won 3 out of the 6 years. Last year, I have to tell you, last year it was turkey, tater trot hot dish. And if you don't know, Minnesota is the turkey capital, and Worthington is the turkey capital. Oh yes, and they have turkey days every year where they bring a turkey named Paycheck up from Cuero, Texas, and we have our turkey, Ruby Begonia, and they race down the middle of Worthington's Main Street. I am the judge who goes along, and how many times, like whenever somebody thinks they're the cleverest people in the world, oh, which one's the turkey? And I'm like, dude, you know how many times I've heard that? I'm running down there, and so I always use turkey. But I called it that because that's the turkey trot. And I was out in DC, thought it was cute. So it's a blind taste test or whatever, and they brought in, they had 3 judges. They had the chaplain of the house, they figured he was unbiased, I guess. And then they brought in the Washington Post food critic, and he had on a ski mask and all this. But he brought his mother, who was there to be the 3rd judge.
They're from Worthington.
Yes, they are. She walked in the room and I said, oh yeah, living right. So that's my favorite one, but in full disclosure, I will tell you this. Of the 6 years And it's all 10 of us partake in this. It gets more press than anything else we do. I passed a new GI Bill this year, first time in decades. I got less press on that than winning the hot dish, honest to God. But anyway, of all of the hot dishes that were there, the best one, and I will say this publicly, Amy Klobuchar had a taconite tater tot hot dish. And it has pepper jack cheese in it or
That's
whatever.
the best one.
In full disclosure, this year we were debating which one of these we were gonna do, because Gwen's, my mother-in-law, and behind every successful congressman is an astonished mother-in-law, and there is in this one. So her mother-in-law is very proud of this, because when it gets talking about politics, she changes it and said, my son wins the hot dish competition with the church ladies, so they're all excited about that. Well, she was a little mad the year I won it using Shell's small salt beer. She said,
She
you
was
cannot use
not
beer.
for that.
You cannot use beer in
She
this.
said, how are we gonna do that at the church?
That's right. But this year, I said, you got politicians saying whatever they want, taking other people's credit. I said, we should just copy Klobuchar's and pretend like it's ours. And just say it was this and put it in again. But we did not. No, thank you for
And
that.
that's online, but that is super easy.
They are online, that's a true story.
That's super easy.
And Betty McCollum was really mad. I have to tell the whole story on this. There's all kinds of press there, and everybody's
big
lined up. So I had my staffers going, and Al makes this special engraved hot dish plate or whatever. So I've got 3 of them. So this year, I had my staffers come walking in and hold them, and I was playing the Rocky theme like we were coming in with our And Betty McCollum was really serious. She goes, Tim, that is very un-Minnesotan to brag like that. Very un-Minnesotan to brag like that.
Yeah, Betty would never do that.
And she won one. I'm very excited about the hot dish, though.
But
So
if you Google it, you can find all of the recipes.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're good.
Yes, sir.
What's your position on oil pipelines, specifically Enbridge Line 3?
As I've spoke about this before, I have voted for pipelines in Congress. I have voted against pipelines when I didn't think they meet the EISs. What I said on Enbridge was, especially when they came out and it said that the route negatively impacted our indigenous people, I said we need to go back to the drawing board. And my position has been on this, not to the whole thing, but to work on the front end. The way I've been successful in southern Minnesota, I get the corn growers to endorse me and the Sierra Club. You don't do that by not figuring out how to get people on the front line. I've said this about pipelines. We need to move things through pipelines in a safe manner that should not be moved by rail that's very unsafe. We should move things through pipelines that free up space to move my soybeans from southern Minnesota that can't be moved by pipeline. And what I said is what I would see as governor in the proposed building is making sure the science and all the things are followed, making sure we're putting things in place and we have a rigorous process. If we're able to do that without negatively impacting people, we should build. Is what we should be able to do. And that's what I've said on it. I voted for them in Congress when they met those requirements. I think it's important to explain. I've said on the Transportation Committee where PHMSA, some of you in this room actually know what PHMSA is, Pipeline Hazard Material Safety Administration. When I show people this, if you want to see a map of America with all the pipelines under it, get ready to really scare your neighbors because they don't realize how many pipelines are there. That means we should make sure they're safe, they're monitored, they're done right. But I don't think that we can do these things. You've seen this elsewhere. If we don't build the coalitions in the front end, we end up with all the problems on the back end. So let's have the honest conversation on this. If we can do these things safely, the science shows that it's there, we can do that. But I will not have people who are being impacted of it not being engaged on the front end. So we can do this. And I think, again, putting your money where your mouth is, I have voted for these things. I have voted to put them in.
Tim, I'm concerned about the elections. I think everybody knows that Minnesota was one of the states that was hacked by the Russians.
Yeah.
How are we going to prevent that in the next election?
Yeah, we need to have a paper ballot, a paper trail on every single thing we do. That is the simple and safest way. I tell all of you this again, and I know that there's the frustrations in this, and you've seen some of it. I've seen some of it behind closed doors, a little more confidential or whatever. What Russia did was try to subvert our democracy. What Russia did, and I can tell you this, I have spoke out when I felt there were things against a Democratic administration and a Republican administration on this. I am deeply concerned that many of our neighbors see this as just another political diversion on this. They did attack the integrity of our voting system. It has been compromised to a certain degree. I never said nor claimed, and we'll see when this investigation is done, that it changed anything. I said one of the things was our candidate could have maybe had a better economic message for rural Minnesota. That would have helped here too. All of those things. It doesn't change the fact that we as Americans in general should be deeply concerned about this. We should switch, and thank God we have Steve Simon, who I think is a wonderful Secretary of State. We certainly should make sure that that paper trail is there, and we should have a conversation in this country expanding further just from the integrity of the voting system, but to the idea of encouraging people to vote. Why are we having conversations about restricting the vote when we should be having conversations about expanding the vote? Why are we voting on Tuesdays in small hours with closed numbers of precincts in this day and age where we can do this on a Saturday or a holiday or do something to expand and getting people in? Why should we not be allowing when someone turns 18, they sign up for selective service? Why are we not registering everybody to get them on? It is a damn shame in this country that less than 50% of the people actually cast ballots. We're not getting the majority to continue to divide us. So I feel deeply concerned about that. I think we need to make sure, as we do in Minnesota, that we do have that paper trail.
We can take one more question, then unfortunately we gotta get on the road.
Ready?
I just wanted to make one quick comment. I wanted to thank Tim for, I know that we have the VA clinic here,
Yes.
and you came and visited them. There are some major issues there.
Yes, there were.
And we found out that it's actually going to go from Sterling, which is a third-party provider, and they're having issues with the veterans coming in there. And then there is going to be, it's turning over, so there's going to be VA staff at the local clinic. So thank you for coming in and meeting with the staff there, figuring it out, and that's going to help a lot of veterans.
Thank you for that comment. I feel grateful to be a part of this. And again, I think it's a very Minnesota thing. You shouldn't get patted on the back for what you're supposed to do. It's also a very Minnesota thing. If you do something good and talk about it, it doesn't count. So thank you for talking about that for me. So, but I can tell you this, that this is how citizens activism is supposed to work. And this is one that, thanking Rick Nolan for putting this out there. Rick Nolan said, you need to come up here with me, you need to look at this. He trusted that I knew this. We looked, we talked to them. And this is, once again, I am not anti, there are many things that the private sector can do better than government can do. There's a time for it. Certain things are the responsibility of government. Certain things are our responsibility to have oversight with. And this issue of the third-party people who were in this, they were not delivering. And that when people say, well, you should just give the veterans a card and let them go anywhere where they can go. Well, who's going to oversight that? How much is that going to cost? And what are you going to do about the specialty care that is specific to veterans that needs to be done in the VA? So we are reaching and trying to bridge some of these issues. And this case here on both those, it's both here in Hibbing and in Ely, we have canceled those contracts and they're going to go back under, and we will have quality people there and those veterans who use it. And I also want to thank folks who said we did a field hearing up in Duluth and we were talking about rural veterans care, and it was kind enough, a couple people said, you know what rural is? Rural is International Falls, and unless I see you there talking about this, I don't give a damn. So on the 20th of this month, we'll be in International Falls. So thank you for that. But very clear. But thank you. And again, to leave you with some optimism in this, Phil Rowe is a Republican from Tennessee who I almost need a translator to understand, and who is politically a world apart from me. We are dear friends. We debate with vigor. We debate with passion. But at the end of the day, it's he and I have been able to carve out a partnership that has moved VA care and the way Congress is supposed to work in a manner that is, it should be this way. And the Wall Street Journal, it was interesting they covered that story. Usually when you do something, they say, well, we only cover the planes that crash. That's why we don't cover the good things. They said, but since every plane in Congress crashes, we're going to cover this story. We're the one that lands. The VA committee's working. There is still that potential out there. And all of us, I don't care if you're staunch DFL, I don't care how far you are left on that spectrum, I don't care if you're Republican or how far right on this is, there is a responsibility to find governance that works. There's a responsibility to the basic things of delivering service, of defense of this nation, of roads, of education, and research, and the things that we can't do alone. Back to Mike's house there, it's not socialism to work together.
We'll come back another time.
We will be back. Well, here's the thing. If we are not back, if we're not back again, we're the wrong people, as you'll know. So
We want to come back again, but I hate to be late.
we gotta go.
Next day.
Thanks, Carly.
So thank you all, you've been so
Thank you
kind.
all.
We will come back again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thanks. Keep it going. I worry on that. Oh, he's fabulous. No, it was a student of mine. Yeah, we will. Okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Oh, sure. Always a pleasure. Let's talk around here. Thank you.